Linda Chen stood at the checkout counter, her hands trembling slightly as she counted the crumpled bills one more time. $47.23. That's all she had left until, well, she didn't know until when. The cashier waited patiently, but Linda could feel the eyes of other shoppers behind her in line. She quickly grabbed items from her cart and put them back on the nearby shelf. The box of cereal went back. The pack of chicken breasts went back. The fresh vegetables went back. What remained in her cart told the whole story of her life right now. 2 loaves of white bread, 3 jars of peanut butter, 6 packets of instant noodles, a gallon of milk, some off-brand mac and cheese boxes, food that would stretch, food that would last, food that her 2 kids would eat without complaining too much. The cashier rang up her items with a sympathetic smile. Linda had seen that look before. That knowing look that said, "I understand. Times are tough." The total came to $32.67. Linda handed over the cash and took her change. $14.56 left to her name. Well, almost. She still had one $10 bill tucked in a separate pocket of her wallet. That money was sacred. That was for her daughter's school lunch account, which was running dangerously low. It had been 3 weeks since the restaurant laid her off. 3 weeks of watching her savings drain away like water through her fingers. 3 weeks of filling out job applications online and hearing nothing back. 3 weeks of telling her kids that everything was going to be okay while lying awake at night, wondering how she'd pay the rent that was due in 5 days. Linda pushed her cart toward the exit, her mind racing through calculations she'd done 100 times already. Rent was $850. Her bank account had the $47 minus what she'd just spent. Her landlord, Mr. Peterson, had been understanding so far, but she knew his patience had limits. He had his own bills to pay. The November wind hit her face as she stepped outside. It was cold. Really cold. The kind of cold that gets into your bones and makes you grateful for whatever shelter you have. Linda pulled her thin jacket tighter around her body. She'd lost weight recently. Stress and skipping meals to make sure her kids had enough will do that to a person. She was halfway across the parking lot when she saw him. An older man, maybe in his 60s, sitting on the ground with his back against the brick wall of the store. He had a cardboard sign propped up next to him. Even from a distance, Linda could see he was shivering. His jacket looked even thinner than hers, and his hands were red from the cold. Linda looked away and kept walking. She had her own problems, her own kids to feed, her own rent to pay. She couldn't save the whole world. Nobody expected her to. She reached her car, an old Honda with a dent in the passenger door, and loaded her groceries into the trunk. But as she sat in the driver's seat, key in the ignition, she couldn't start the engine. Something kept pulling at her. She glanced back toward the store entrance. The man was still there, not moving, just sitting in the cold. A few people walked past him. Nobody stopped. Nobody even looked at him, really. It was like he was invisible. Linda's father had been a kind man. He'd passed away 5 years ago, but she still remembered the things he taught her. "When you have a little and you give it away, that's when it means the most," he used to say. He'd been the type to give his last dollar to someone in need. Her mother used to scold him for it, but he'd just smile and say, "It always comes back around." She looked at her grocery bag in the passenger seat. Then she looked at her wallet. That $10 bill sat there crisp and waiting. $10 that her daughter needed for lunch. $10 that might buy a meal or 2 at school. $10 that she absolutely, positively could not afford to give away. Linda sat there for a full 5 minutes having an argument with herself. The practical side of her brain listed all the reasons she needed that money. The bills, the kids, the uncertain future. But another voice, quieter but more persistent, reminded her of what it felt like to be desperate, to be invisible, to wonder if anyone in the world cared whether you lived or died. Before she could change her mind, Linda grabbed the $10 bill and got out of the car. Her legs carried her back across the parking lot almost on their own. As she got closer, she could see the man more clearly. His face was weathered and rough with a gray beard that needed trimming. But his eyes were clear. Sad but clear, his sign said, "Hungry. Anything helps." "God bless you." Linda stopped in front of him. He looked up at her, and for a moment neither of them said anything. She could see her father in this man's face. Not literally, but something about the way his eyes held a dignity despite his circumstances. "Here," Linda said, holding out the $10 bill. Her voice came out softer than she intended. Get yourself something warm to eat. And maybe some coffee?" The man stared at the money like it was a winning lottery ticket. His hand shook as he reached up to take it. "Thank you," he whispered. His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it much lately. "Thank you so much. You don't know what this means to me." Linda nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Her throat felt tight. She turned quickly and walked back to her car before the tears could come. As she drove away, she didn't look back. She couldn't, because if she did, she might realize what she'd just done. She'd given away her daughter's lunch money to a complete stranger. She'd given away money she desperately needed herself. The logical part of her brain started screaming at her the moment she pulled out of the parking lot. What had she been thinking? How was she going to explain this to her kids? How was she going to make this work? But underneath all that panic and worry, there was something else, something small and warm, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, there was still some good left in the world. And maybe, just maybe, she was part of it. Linda drove home in a daze, her mind bouncing between regret and something she couldn't quite name. Hope? No, that seemed too strong. Maybe just the faint memory of what hope used to feel like. She parked in front of her apartment building, a worn-down complex on the east side of town where the paint peeled and the stairs creaked. Her daughter, Amy, was doing homework at the kitchen table when Linda walked in. At 12 years old, Amy had become quieter lately, more aware of things. She noticed when her mother skipped meals. She noticed when the worried look on Linda's face lasted longer than usual. "How was school?" Linda asked, setting the grocery bag on the counter. "Fine," Amy said, not looking up from her math worksheet. "Mrs. Patterson said my lunch account is almost empty again." Linda's stomach dropped. Right, the lunch account. The money she'd just given away to a stranger. "I'll take care of it tomorrow," she said, trying to sound casual. It was a lie. She had no idea how she'd take care of it. Her son Ben burst through the front door a moment later. At 9 years old, he still had that energy that seemed endless. "Mom, can I go to the science museum next week?" "It's only $15 for the field trip, please. Everyone's going." $15 might as well have been $1,500. "We'll see, honey," Linda said. Another lie. Another thing she couldn't afford. Another disappointment she'd have to deliver eventually. That night, Linda lay in bed and did the math in her head for the 100th time. She had about $15 left. Rent was $850 due in 5 days. She'd applied to 23 jobs in the past 3 weeks. 23 rejections, or worse, complete silence. The unemployment benefits hadn't kicked in yet, and even when they did, they wouldn't be enough to cover everything. She thought about the homeless man, about his grateful eyes, about the way his hands shook when he took the money. Had she been stupid, reckless? Her kids needed that money, but then again he'd needed it too. Maybe more than they did. At least she had a roof over her head. At least her kids had beds to sleep in. Linda finally fell asleep sometime after 2 in the morning, her dreams filled with past due notices and empty refrigerators. The next 3 days passed in a blur of job applications and growing anxiety. Linda checked her email obsessively, hoping for any response from the dozens of applications she'd sent out. Nothing. She called about a waitressing position at a diner across town. They'd already filled it. She inquired about a cashier job at a gas station. They wanted someone with open availability, which meant someone without kids who needed to be picked up from school. On the 3rd day, Linda was at the public library using their computer to fill out more applications. Her phone was old and slow, so the library's computers were her best option. She'd just finished submitting an application to a cleaning company when her phone rang. Unknown number. Probably a spam call, but she answered anyway. You never knew. "Hello, is this Linda Chen?" A man's voice, professional, serious. "Yes, this is she." Linda's heart started beating faster. Was this about a job? Or worse, was this a debt collector? "Ms. Chen, my name is Robert Huang. I'm an attorney here in the city." He paused. "I'm calling on behalf of a client of mine. I believe you met him outside a grocery store about 3 days ago." Linda's mind raced. The homeless man? Had something happened to him? Had she done something wrong? I'm not sure what this is about. "My client's name is James Morrison. You gave him $10 in a parking lot. Does that ring a bell?" "Yes," Linda said slowly. Her hands were sweating. "Is he okay? I just wanted to help. I didn't mean any—" "Ms. Chen, Please don't worry. You're not in any trouble. Quite the opposite, actually. The lawyer's tone softened. I need to explain something to you, and I know this is going to sound strange. Mr. Morrison is not actually homeless. Linda blinked. What? Mr. Morrison is a retired businessman. He's worth several $1 million. For the past year, he's been conducting what he calls a social experiment. He's been living on the streets in various cities, trying to understand poverty and homelessness. But he's also been looking for something. Linda couldn't process what she was hearing. Looking for what? Kindness. Genuine, selfless kindness. Mr. Morrison has been keeping track of every interaction he's had over the past year. Thousands of people have walked past him. A few hundred have given him money. But he's been watching more carefully than that. He watches what people do before they help him. He notices things. I don't understand, Linda whispered. Ms. Chen, Mr. Morrison saw you in the grocery store before you saw him. He watched you put items back because you couldn't afford them. He saw you counting your money. He has a way of observing people that most don't notice. After you gave him that $10, he went into the store. He asked the cashier about you. He learned that you'd been counting coins, that you'd carefully calculated every purchase. Linda felt her face flush. The idea that someone had been watching her moment of struggle felt invasive and embarrassing. He wanted me to tell you that you were one of only 17 people, out of thousands, who stopped to help him when they themselves were struggling. Most people who give to the homeless can afford it, but you couldn't. You gave him money you needed. Money your daughter needed for school lunches. Money you'd set aside as sacred. Tears started running down Linda's face. She was still in the library, and people were starting to look at her. She grabbed her things and rushed outside, phone still pressed to her ear. Why are you telling me this? She managed to ask. Because Mr. Morrison wants to meet you. He wants to thank you properly. And Ms. Chen, he wants to help you. Would you be willing to come to his office tomorrow morning, say 10 o'clock? Linda's mind was spinning. This had to be some kind of scam. Things like this didn't happen in real life. Rich people didn't pretend to be homeless. They didn't track down struggling single mothers who gave them $10. This had to be a trick. But what if it wasn't, Ms. Chen? The lawyer prompted. Yes. Yes, I can be there. Where? He gave her an address downtown, a building she'd passed 100 times but never been inside. One of those tall glass towers where important people worked. That night, Linda didn't sleep at all. She kept expecting another call telling her it was all a mistake, or a joke, or a scam. She Googled the lawyer's name and found a legitimate law firm. She Googled James Morrison and found dozens of articles about a tech entrepreneur who'd sold his company 5 years ago for a fortune. It was real, or at least it seemed real. But Linda had learned a long time ago that things that seemed too good to be true usually were. She'd been disappointed enough times to know better than to hope. Still, as she lay in the darkness, her daughter sleeping in the next room and her son snoring softly down the hall, she allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, just for one night. What if? Linda woke up at 6 in the morning even though she hadn't really slept. She'd dozed off a few times, but her mind kept jolting her awake with questions and doubts. She got the kids ready for school, made them breakfast with the last of the bread and peanut butter, and tried to act normal, but Amy noticed. Amy always noticed. You look tired, Mom, she said, studying Linda's face across the kitchen table. Just didn't sleep well. I've got an important meeting today. About a job? There was hope in Amy's voice. Hope that made Linda's chest ache. Maybe, we'll see. After dropping the kids at school, Linda drove downtown. She'd worn her best outfit, which wasn't saying much. A pair of black pants she'd bought 3 years ago and a blue blouse that was starting to fade. She'd tried to cover the dark circles under her eyes with makeup, but they still showed through. The building was even more intimidating up close. All glass and steel, reaching up into the sky like it was trying to touch the clouds. Linda stood on the sidewalk for a full minute, trying to gather her courage. People in expensive suits rushed past her, all of them looking important and busy. She felt completely out of place. Inside, the lobby was all marble and chrome. Her footsteps echoed as she walked to the reception desk. A young woman with perfect hair and a perfect smile asked how she could help. "I have a meeting with Robert Huang," Linda said, her voice coming out smaller than she intended. "At 10 o'clock. The receptionist checked her computer and nodded. 15th floor, the elevator is right over there." Linda's hands were shaking as she pressed the button. The elevator was the fancy kind that didn't even have buttons inside. It just knew where you needed to go. Soft music played as she rose up, watching the floor numbers tick higher. Her reflection in the polished doors showed a woman who looked terrified. The 15th floor opened into another reception area. This one was quieter, more sophisticated. There was expensive art on the walls and leather furniture that probably cost more than Linda's car. Another receptionist, another perfect smile. She was expected. Mr. Huang would be right with her. Linda sat down on a chair that was more comfortable than her bed at home. She waited. Every minute felt like an hour. She kept expecting someone to come out and tell her there'd been a mistake, that she was in the wrong place, that she needed to leave. But instead, a man in his 50s emerged from a hallway, Asian, wearing a suit that looked custom-made with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. "Ms. Chen, I'm Robert Huang. Thank you so much for coming." They shook hands. His grip was firm but warm. He led her down the hallway to a conference room, and that's when she saw him, the homeless man from the parking lot. Except he wasn't homeless, not even close. He was clean-shaven now, his gray hair neatly trimmed. Instead of torn, dirty clothes, he wore slacks and a crisp white shirt. He looked like someone's grandfather, someone's successful, wealthy grandfather. He smiled when he saw her, and Linda recognized those eyes, the same ones that had looked up at her with such gratitude 3 days ago. "Ms. Chen," he said, standing up and extending his hand. "I'm James Morrison, though I suppose you knew me as someone else entirely." Linda shook his hand, still unable to fully process what was happening. "I don't understand any of this. Please, sit down. I know this must be confusing. Let me explain." James gestured to a chair and Linda sat. Robert Huang sat down too, opening a folder in front of him. James leaned forward, his expression serious. "For the past year, I've been living on the streets. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand. After I sold my company 5 years ago, I had more money than I could ever spend, but I felt empty, disconnected. I'd spent my whole life building businesses and making money, and I realized I didn't know anything about real people, about struggle, about what actually matters." He paused, and Linda noticed his eyes were getting misty. "So I decided to try an experiment. I gave myself a year to live homeless in different cities, to see what it was really like, to see how people treated someone they thought had nothing. And I learned a lot. Most of it wasn't pleasant." Linda found her voice. "Why? Why would you do that?" "Because I wanted to find people worth helping. I know that sounds strange, but I've donated millions to charities over the years, and I never knew if it made a real difference. I wanted to find individuals who truly understood kindness, who would help someone even when it hurt them to do so." Robert Huang opened his folder. "We've been documenting Mr. Morrison's interactions over the past year. He's been in 15 different cities. He's encountered approximately 4,300 people who came close enough to see his sign. Of those, 247 gave him money. But you were different." "How?" Linda asked. James smiled. "I was sitting outside that grocery store when you went in. I saw you through the window. I watched you counting money at the register. I saw you put items back. After you gave me that $10, I went inside. I talked to the cashier. She told me you'd been counting coins, that you'd carefully calculated every single purchase." Linda felt exposed, vulnerable. "I also saw you go to your car and sit there for 5 minutes before you came back. I watched you have an argument with yourself. I knew that money meant something to you, and you gave it anyway." Robert Huang slid a piece of paper across the table. "Ms. Chen, Mr. Morrison has a foundation. Its purpose is to help people who show genuine compassion even in difficult circumstances. You're one of 17 people he's identified this year as truly deserving." Linda looked at the paper. There were numbers on it. Big numbers. Numbers that didn't make sense. "That's a grant," James said quietly. $50,000. No strings attached. It's yours. You can pay your rent, feed your kids, get back on your feet. Linda's vision blurred. The numbers swam on the page. $50,000. She'd never seen that much money in her life. She couldn't breathe. "But that's not all," James continued. "I've learned in my year on the streets that the best help isn't just money. It's opportunity. My foundation needs someone to manage community outreach, someone who understands struggle, someone who knows what it's like to have nothing and still choose kindness. I'd like to offer you that position. $75,000 a year. Full benefits. Health insurance for you and your kids." Linda couldn't speak. She couldn't move. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. "I know this is overwhelming," Robert Huang said gently. "You don't have to decide about the job right now. But the grant is yours regardless. We can transfer it to your account today if you'd like." Linda looked up at James. At this man who'd pretended to be homeless, who'd sat in the cold and watched thousands of people walk past him, who'd somehow decided she was worth this incredible, impossible gift. "Why me?" she whispered. "I'm nobody. I'm just a single mom who lost her job. There are so many people worse off than me." James reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "You're wrong about that. You're not nobody. You're exactly the person I've been looking for. Someone who has every reason to be bitter and selfish but chooses kindness instead. That's rare. That's precious. And that's worth investing in." Tears streamed down Linda's face. She thought about her kids, about the past 3 weeks of fear and worry, about the $10 bill she'd given away because something inside her couldn't walk past another human being in need, about her father and the lessons he'd taught her about giving when you had nothing left to give. "I don't know what to say," she managed. "Say yes," James smiled. "Say yes to the grant. Think about the job, but mostly just know that your kindness mattered. It changed everything. And now, if you'll let me, I'd like to help you the way you helped me." Linda walked out of that building in a complete daze. She had a check in her purse for $50,000. $50,000. She kept taking it out to look at it just to make sure it was real, that the numbers hadn't changed, that she hadn't imagined the whole thing. She sat in her car in the parking garage for 20 minutes just crying. Not sad tears. Not exactly happy tears either. Something bigger than both. Relief, gratitude, disbelief, all mixed together until she couldn't tell where one feeling ended and another began. Her phone buzzed. A text from the school. Amy's lunch account was overdrawn. They needed payment by the end of the week. Linda laughed out loud, a slightly hysterical sound that echoed in the empty garage. The lunch account. She could pay for Amy's lunch account for the next 10 years if she wanted to. But first, she needed to make sure this was real. That the check would actually clear. That this wasn't some elaborate mistake. She drove to her bank, the little branch on the corner where she'd had an account since she was 23. Where the tellers knew her by name because she'd been coming in for years. The teller's eyes went wide when she saw the check. "Miss Chen, I'll need to get the manager for this." The manager, a middle-aged woman named Patricia, came over. She looked at the check, looked at Linda, looked at the check again. "Is this legitimate?" she asked carefully. Linda explained the whole story, or at least the short version. Patricia listened, her expression shifting from skeptical to amazed. "I need to verify this with the issuing bank. It might take a few hours. Is that okay?" Linda nodded. A few hours. She could wait a few hours. She'd been living on hope and air for 3 weeks. A few more hours wouldn't kill her. She picked up her kids from school and took them home. Made them snacks with the peanut butter that was almost gone. Helped Ben with his reading homework. Watched Amy pretend to do her math while actually texting her friends on the old phone Linda had given her. The call came at 4:30. "Ms. Chen, this is Patricia from the bank. Your check has been verified. I've deposited it into your account. The funds should be available tomorrow morning." Linda had to sit down. Her legs just stopped working. That night she told her kids. She tried to explain what had happened, but it sounded crazy even to her own ears. A homeless man who wasn't homeless. A millionaire who lived on the streets. A reward for kindness. Ben thought it was like a superhero movie. Amy was more cautious, more suspicious. "Are you sure this isn't a scam, Mom?" "I'm sure, baby. I checked everything. It's real. They ordered pizza that night. Real pizza from the good place, not the cheap place. Linda even got breadsticks and soda. They ate until they were full, something they hadn't done in weeks. The next morning, Linda paid her rent. She walked into Mr. Peterson's office and handed him a check for not just this month, but next month, too. He looked shocked. Found a job? He asked. Something like that, Linda smiled. She paid off her credit card, the one she'd maxed out buying school supplies and winter coats for the kids. She put $300 into Amy's lunch account. She bought Ben his field trip permission slip and added an extra $20 for the gift shop. She bought groceries. Real groceries. Fresh vegetables, good meat, fruit that wasn't bruised and on sale, and then she called Robert Huang. "I want the job," she said. "If the offer is still open." "It absolutely is." "When can you start?" The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Linda started her new position at the Morrison Foundation. The office was beautiful. Her desk overlooked the city. She had business cards with her name on them. She had health insurance, dental insurance, a retirement account. But more than that, she had purpose. James Morrison met with her every few days to explain the foundation's work. They helped homeless veterans get housing. They provided scholarships to single parents trying to finish their education. They connected job seekers with employers who valued character over credentials. "I want you to help me find more people like you," James explained. "People who show kindness when it costs them something. Those are the people who will use help to lift others up, not just themselves." Linda threw herself into the work. She visited homeless shelters and talked to people about their stories. She partnered with community organizations. She learned about grant writing and nonprofit management. James introduced her to his network of successful business people, many of whom wanted to help once they heard about the foundation's mission. But James wasn't just a boss. He became a friend, a mentor, almost like family. He met her kids. He showed up to Ben's school play. He helped Amy pick out a laptop for school when her old one finally died. "Why are you doing all this?" Linda asked him one day, about 3 months into her new job. They were having coffee in his office, reviewing grant applications. James was quiet for a moment. "I told you about my experiment, about living on the streets. But I didn't tell you everything." He set down his coffee cup. "I had a daughter once. Her name was Rebecca. She died 20 years ago, cancer. She was only 16. Linda's heart broke. "I'm so sorry. Before she died, she made me promise something. She made me promise I'd do something meaningful with my life, that I wouldn't just make money, that I'd help people." He looked out the window, his eyes distant. "I didn't keep that promise for a long time. I was too busy building my business, making my fortune. By the time I sold my company, I realized I'd wasted 20 years, that I'd broken my promise to my daughter. That's why you started the foundation. That's why I started the foundation. And when I met you, when I saw you give away your last $10 to a stranger, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. I saw the kind of person my daughter was, the kind of person she wanted me to help." Linda reached across and squeezed his hand. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. 6 months into her new job, Linda had helped the foundation distribute over $2 million in grants. She'd connected 43 people with meaningful employment. She'd helped launch a new program for homeless youth that was already showing amazing results. But the best part wasn't the numbers, it was the stories. Like the single dad who got help with rent and childcare so he could finish his nursing degree. Like the veteran who got housing and job training and was now working as a counselor for other veterans. Like the teenager who got a scholarship and was now the first person in her family to go to college. Every person Linda helped reminded her of where she'd been 6 months ago. Counting coins at a grocery store, deciding whether to give away her last $10, making a choice that changed her entire life. One day, James called her into his office. "I've been thinking about expanding our work. I want to take the foundation national, maybe even international, but that means I need someone I trust to run things, someone who understands our mission at a deep level." Linda waited, her heart starting to beat faster. "I want you to be the executive director. I'll still be involved, but you'd be running the day-to-day operations. Full authority to make decisions, substantial salary increase. What do you think?" Linda thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, desperate, scared, almost broken. And she thought about the woman she was now, confident, purposeful, whole. "I think I'd be honored," she said. "But I have one condition." James raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" We create a program specifically for people who help others even when they can't afford to. People like I was. We find them, and we help them. And then we help them help others. We make kindness contagious. James smiled. The kind of smile that reached his eyes and made him look 10 years younger. I think Rebecca would have loved that idea. Let's do it. 2 years had passed since that cold November day in the grocery store parking lot. 2 years since Linda Chen had given her last $10 to a stranger and changed her life forever. But if you asked her, she'd tell you it wasn't just her life that changed. It was hundreds of lives, maybe even thousands. The Kindness Initiative, as they called it, had become the flagship program of the Morrison Foundation. The concept was simple but powerful. They identified people who showed extraordinary compassion in difficult circumstances. Then they helped those people get back on their feet. And then, once those people were stable, they helped them become helpers themselves. It created a ripple effect that Linda could never have imagined. Take Rachel, for instance. A school teacher who'd been working 2 jobs after her husband left her with 3 kids. She was exhausted all the time, barely making ends meet. But when her elderly neighbor fell and broke her hip, Rachel took care of her for 6 weeks, cooked her meals, drove her to doctor appointments, did her grocery shopping, all while juggling her own impossible schedule. Someone nominated Rachel for the Kindness Initiative. The foundation paid off her debt and helped her get reliable childcare. Within a year, Rachel had started a community program that matched struggling single parents with volunteers who could help with childcare, tutoring, and basic household tasks. The program now operated in 12 cities or markets. No, wait, Linda smiled to herself. She'd promised not to use common names in the stories. But the people were real, even if she sometimes changed their names to protect their privacy. There was a young veteran, recently returned from overseas, dealing with PTSD and struggling to find work. He'd been living in his car but still volunteered at a soup kitchen every weekend. Said it helped him feel useful. The foundation helped him get housing and connected him with a job training program. Now he ran a non-profit that helped other veterans transition to civilian life. Last month, they'd helped 43 veterans find stable housing and employment. These stories multiplied. They branched out like a tree, each person who received help reaching out to help others. The foundation kept track of the impact. They called it the kindness metric. For every person they helped directly, an average of 7 more people benefited indirectly within the first year. Within 2 years, that number grew to 23. Linda still remembered every detail of the foundation's first success story. A 19-year-old college student who'd dropped out to take care of her sick mother. She'd been working at a convenience store, sending every penny home. One day, she'd given her employee meal to a homeless woman who came into the store. Her manager saw it and fired her for giving away store property. The foundation found her through a social media post about the incident. They helped her get back into school, paid her tuition, helped her mother get better medical care. That young woman graduated last spring with a degree in social work. She now worked for the foundation, running their youth outreach program. Linda's own kids had grown too. Amy was 14 now, volunteering at the foundation on weekends. She wanted to be a lawyer someday. Said she wanted to help people who couldn't afford justice. Ben was 11, still full of energy, but he'd developed a habit of giving his allowance to people in need. Linda would find random donations missing from his room. A few dollars here, a $5 bill there. When she asked him about it, he just shrugged and said, "You taught me that helping people is more important than stuff." She hadn't taught him that. Not directly, but he'd learned it anyway by watching her. By seeing what happened when you chose kindness over fear, by understanding that giving doesn't make you poorer, it makes you richer in ways that matter more than money. James Morrison had become like a grandfather to her kids. He showed up for their birthdays, came to their school events, taught Ben how to play chess, helped Amy practice for her debate team competitions, but he never treated them like charity cases. He treated them like family. "You know what the best part of all this is?" James said to Linda one afternoon. They were in the foundation's office looking at the latest impact report. The numbers were staggering. Over $5 million distributed in the past year. 347 people helped directly. Over 8,000 people impacted indirectly. "What's that?" Linda asked. "I kept my promise to Rebecca, finally, after all these years." His eyes were misty. "She wanted me to make a difference. To help people. to be more than just a rich guy writing checks, and I think we're doing that. We definitely are, Linda agreed. But here's the thing I didn't expect, James continued. I thought I was looking for kind people to help. But what I found was so much more than that. I found proof that kindness exists even in the darkest circumstances. That people will help each other even when they have nothing. And that gives me hope, real hope. For the first time in 20 years, Linda understood exactly what he meant. She'd felt hopeless 2 years ago. Completely and utterly without hope. And then a moment of kindness, a simple choice to help someone, had opened a door she didn't even know existed. The foundation continued to grow. They expanded to 15 cities, then 20, then 30. They partnered with other organizations, churches, community centers, schools. Everyone wanted to be part of something that was actually working, something that was changing lives in measurable, meaningful ways. But Linda never forgot where she came from. Once a month, she went back to that grocery store, the same one where she'd met James 2 years ago. She'd sit outside just like he had, and she'd talk to people, really talk to them, listen to their stories. Sometimes she could help them through the foundation. Sometimes all she could offer was a listening ear and a few dollars. But she never stopped showing up. One particularly cold December evening, Linda was sitting outside that grocery store when a woman approached. Her, middle-aged, tired-looking, the kind of tired that comes from working. Too many hours for too little pay. The woman pressed a $5 bill into Linda's hand. Here, she said. Get yourself something warm. Linda looked up at her, surprised. Thank you, but I don't need this. I'm not actually homeless. The woman looked confused. Oh, I'm sorry. I just thought, it's okay, Linda smiled. I sit here once a month. It reminds me of someone who helped me when I needed it most. But please, you keep your money. Or better yet, pay it forward to someone who needs it. The woman sat down next to her. That's a nice idea. I like that. She paused. Can I tell you something? Of course. That $5 is all I have until payday tomorrow. I was going to use it for lunch. But when I saw you sitting here, I thought about my grandmother. She always said the best thing you can do with your last dollar is give it to someone who needs it more. Linda felt tears welling up. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. I run a foundation that helps people like you. People who show kindness even when they're struggling themselves. Would you be willing to talk to me about your situation? The woman looked at the card, looked at Linda. Is this real? It's very real. I know because 2 years ago, I was exactly where you are now, and someone helped me, and now I get to help others, including you if you'll let me. The woman started crying. Linda put her arm around her shoulders. They sat there together in the cold. 2 women who understood what it meant to have nothing and still choose to give. That's what the foundation had become, not just an organization that gave money, but a community of people who understood that kindness was the most valuable currency in the world, that it could be passed from person to person, multiplying with each exchange. Linda thought about that $10 bill she'd given away 2 years ago. $10 that had turned into $5 million. $10 that had changed hundreds of lives. $10 that had taught her the most important lesson she'd ever learned. When you have nothing left to give except kindness, that's exactly when kindness matters most. Because kindness doesn't come from what you have. It comes from who you are. And who you are can never be taken away, no matter how little money is in your bank account or how many bills pile up on your kitchen table. That night, Linda went home to her comfortable house. The one she'd bought with her foundation salary. She made dinner for her kids in her full refrigerator. She helped Amy with her homework and listened to Ben talk about his day at school. And she thought about how different her life was from 2 years ago. But the most important thing hadn't changed at all. She was still the same person who'd given her last $10 to a stranger, still the same person who believed that helping others mattered more than protecting herself, still the same person who'd rather go hungry than let someone else suffer. The money had changed her circumstances, but kindness had changed her life. And now, thanks to the foundation, she got to spend every day helping other people discover the same truth. That kindness was the most powerful force in the world. That it could transform not just one life, but thousands. That it could turn a moment of compassion into a lifetime of meaning. Linda fell asleep that night thinking about all the people the foundation would help tomorrow. And the next day, and the day after that. Because what started with $10 in a parking lot had become something bigger than she ever imagined, something that would outlive her, something that would keep spreading person to person, heart to heart, long after she was gone. And it all started because one woman, who had every reason to think only of herself, chose to think of someone else instead. That's all it took. One choice. One moment. $10. And the courage to believe that kindness, even when it costs you everything, is always worth it.